my name is Erica, and I help Nomadic Matt run his community events branch of Nomadic Matt. It's called the Nomadic Network, and we launched it back in 2019 specifically for people to meet like-minded travelers so that they could basically learn other ways to travel cheaper, better, longer, and more. And obviously, during the pandemic, we had to pivot and make everything virtual. And we've held over 200 virtual presentations in the last year and a half. And it's been really fun because this surprising little pandemic had this surprising effect where we actually got to have people come and speak from all over the world to people that were listening in from all over the world. So right now, Matt's in Europe, Sarah's on the West Coast, and I'm in New York. And I'm sure you guys are calling in from all over. I can't see the chat, but I'm sure you're not in these cities, or not all of you. And so that is what we're doing today. A few things to keep in mind. Feel free to turn your camera on. This is a community event, though you will be muted. We have over 170 people in the community with us today, so we can't unmute you today. I'm sorry about that, but feel free to use the chat to connect, share your relevant experiences, and ask any questions you may have. I will ask that you type the word question in before you ask a question so that I can find them easily. I just wanted to say that our speakers are always doing this out of the kindness of their heart and their passion for sharing their knowledge with you. And for that, we are super grateful and encourage you to follow them, connect with them, and use them as resources in the future. We are, again, here to learn, satiate your wanderlust, and have fun. And then two things I would like to note. One, for this replay, any past replays and any future replays of our events, you can join Nomadic Matt Plus, which is our membership network. That's at nomadicmatt.com/NM Plus. And also, we'd love for you to follow us on Instagram, and you could do that via those QR codes. I will stop sharing my screen and pass the mic on to Matt, who will introduce Sarah and this topic.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks for joining us. Greetings from northern Croatia, where I'm here for a little bit. As so many of you, always email me and ask me about it, and always wonder about it on our planning calls. Travel insurance is a very sometimes opaque, travel need. It's a lot hard to understand plans and policies and what should you get, what kind of coverage should you get, what about coverage through your credit card, and there's just a lot of like moving parts that are confusing. It's insurance, it's not always meant to be simple. So we wanted to have a talk about this subject, not only for me, but someone on the inside, someone that could give you a little insider information about travel insurance, how it works, how decisions are made, and why you need it, what kind of coverage you should get, and all those sort of inside tips someone who works in travel insurance could provide. And want to provide you with the forum to ask them all the kind of questions that you ask me, and really don't make it easy on them, so just make it easy. So we have Sarah, who is a co-founder and current CTO of the travel insurance company SafetyWing. They're fairly new, only 3-4 years, something like that. 4 years, which in the insurance world is very new. And so, they are doing a lot of great things. They offer a lot of great coverage. So we wanted to bring them on board. As you know, we started promoting them earlier this year, actually last year. And so it's great to have them on board talking to you about this topic. So without further ado, because she's got a great presentation, I want to introduce Sarah, the CTO of SafetyWing. Sarah, you can unmute yourself. Maybe I can unmute you.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. I just realized. Hey, everyone, and thanks so much for the introduction, Matt. I will just start sharing my screen. Let me see. And here we go. So yeah, I'm so excited to have so many people here being interested in talking about this. So yeah, like Matt said, I'm from SafetyWing, and we started SafetyWing back in 2017 with the ambition to contribute to a borderless world by building a global social safety net. So the travel insurance that we launched back in 2018 is kind of just the first step on a long journey. We launched a health insurance last year, and we have pension savings coming up next year. But today I'm just going to be talking about our insurance for nomads, which is our travel insurance. And I'm going to bring it back to the basics. I'm sure everyone here kind of has, knows what insurance is, but it's kind of like an ominous, insurance doesn't have a very positive ring to it. So I just want to, talk about insurance a little bit in like a high level, different light, and then, we can get into any kind of like specifics or technicalities that you're wondering about afterwards. So yeah, on the most basic level, what is insurance? Like I said, we kind of have this, we think of, when we hear the word insurance, we don't, we think more like, ugh, rather than like, yay. And, but it's actually a very kind of like a very nifty, almost virtuous concept of people coming together and putting their money into a pot. And then, we all agree that, if something really bad happens to you, then, you get paid from the pot. That's kind of what the concept of insurance is. And insurance companies are the companies that facilitate this. So, insurance companies have experience with coming up with like, what is this like list of events that should be covered? How do we mitigate the risk so that it's not super expensive? Because if you create, for example, if you cover extreme sports in like a base package, then everyone would have to pay for those extreme sports, and that will bring the price up. So an insurance company will create the policy that is the most beneficial to everyone there, and yeah, so that you can share the risk. That's kind of when you buy a policy, you buy into sharing the risk with whoever else is buying that policy. And then kind of, yeah, like talked about it as kind of putting money into the pot. And, you see a lot of different insurances around, and, you can always assume that it's fairly priced, but because it's just based on the average expected cost per member. That is based on that list that is made. The higher the risk, the more you pay, sometimes it's just averaged out on anyone, or sometimes there are slightly different price tiers. Like for example, age is a common one where you pay more if you're older, and you pay less when you're younger, just because you in general have a higher risk of something happening to your health as you get older. Also, obviously the insurance company takes a cut to facilitate all this. It's also a very regulated space, so a lot of the work that an insurance company does is dealing with compliance and those kinds of things. And also, yeah, just to add to the fact that I'm a co-founder and CTO, I also do. I am a licensed insurance agent and do a decent amount of compliance. Like I write the stuff that goes through compliance review. So I'm kind of at that like link between users and compliance. Yeah, know our policy pretty well because of this. And then, so that is about, how it's priced, how much you should put into the pot, and then how do you get money out of the pot? So when you buy the insurance, you enter a contract with the insurance company, and it has a list of the things, you know, that will allow you to take money out of the pot. You know, and in general, when you hear talk about insurance companies, you know, like people use a lot of language like insurance companies are just there to, you know, like, you know, they're greedy and want to take the money, but it's more about, it's about, you know, you've all agreed to something when you put money into the pot. And if anyone could take out, you know, if you can start going outside of that list that you all agreed to, you know, then the price of the insurance should have been different. So when something that is covered happens, then, you know, you provide some proof for that, or typically it's actually, if it's a medical claim, then it's the hospital that will provide the proof for that. And then you get money, or the hospital, like if sometimes or very often the payment goes, you're not even involved, the money goes straight from the insurance company and into the hospital. Yeah, so the sad thing is that if it's not covered, you get nothing. So it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with specifically what is not covered, to just avoid putting yourself in those situations. Typically, it's like common sense, you know, don't drink and drive. But there are also, with travel insurance in particular, pre-existing conditions is a typical one. So if you, for example, I mean, there's one thing if you have like a chronic diagnosis like, you know, multiple sclerosis or diabetes, then things related to that will not get covered. But also if you, for example, you know, broke your leg 2 months ago, then like in any incident to you know, and then you buy insurance, then that would also be a pre-existing condition. So, you know, if you accidentally step on your leg and like re-break that leg, that would also be a pre-existing condition and is not covered by travel insurance. So these are some things to know, and you know, the technicalities we can get into later. Why get insurance? The big one here is to protect yourself from financial ruin. So yeah, already explained the concept of pooling money together. But the main reason there is not, you know, it's something, you know, it can feel nice to have like insurance that covers like, you know, small things here and there, but the main issue is if something big happens. And a lot of people underestimate how expensive a medical claim can get, you know, because, you know, maybe you're in, you know, a country where medical costs are in general pretty low. You know, you have something, you know, say you have like you get like a dog bite or something and you go to get a rabies shot, and then oh, that was only $20, you know, and then you think that, you know, it's always just going to be cheap. But no matter where you are in the world, the medical bills can quickly stack up, because say you're in a horrible accident, and you need to get like emergency helicoptered or by airplane to a hospital in a different country that's good enough to take care of you, and suddenly you're no longer in that country where the hospitals were so cheap. Suddenly you find yourself in, you know, you were in Cambodia, but suddenly now you're in either Thailand or Singapore, and you're on the operating table, and something like that can cost, you know, like more than $100,000, which can really set someone back financially. So this is where, you know, it's up to everyone, you know, if they want to live with that risk. But it's, you know, what we do on a regular basis hear about these horrible stories of people having to sell their house if they own a house, or you know, that people start GoFundMes and they just, you know, become like eternally indebted to this, you know, from not having the insurance. And I don't want to, you know, it's up to everyone. I don't want to like create scare propaganda, but this is the reason to get insurance, is to protect yourself from financial ruin. Another reason is to ensure that you get great care. It's with hospitals, you know, around the world, you know, in some countries, in most countries, they have a combination of private and public hospitals. If you have travel insurance, you can typically go to a private hospital, but depending on where you are, in general, you might get much better care if you are insured. If you're not insured, you know, they will they will do the bare minimum of patching you up. I mean, you can imagine if you're running a private company and you're getting patients and, if you're guaranteed to get paid or not makes a big difference in terms of how much effort you're going to put into that. So that this is even if you could afford it, the people or hospitals will typically trust an insurance company to pay more than they will trust an individual to pay, which means that you will get better care as an insured person. The other thing is, when worst comes to worst, I'm sure, a lot of people have been to hospitals here, and, it can be kind of an overwhelming and confusing experience. The insurance company is on your side when talking to the, while sometimes the hospital might be on, wanting to make as much money as possible and might offer to treat you for things that are not covered without telling you that it's not covered. Both with you and your loved ones, if you're incapacitated, then the insurance company is someone that can help you and your loved ones make medical decisions. So it's also just like a general, if you're out in the world and you're far away from family and people that care about you, it's nice to have an insurance company there just in case something happens, and they will then immediately contact your nearest. So yeah, since the concept of since the main reason to get insurance is to protect yourself from financial ruin, medical coverage is in general for us nomads the most important thing. I mean, it's nice to have insurance for like your laptop and phone and other small things, and in general, and smaller travel things. But the main reason, and what you should be most wary of, is having medical insurance, because even though it would suck to lose a laptop, it will typically not financially ruin you. One more thing about insurance is that, I mean, you're expected to pay more in the premiums than getting out of it. So, for a laptop, for example, you are, if you have your laptop insured, you're expected to pay in more than for the laptop. So in that case, it might be better to just take the risk. I mean, it depends on you and how predictable you'd like your life to be. The main reason to have insurance is to protect yourself from the really big costs. Just some general tips here on how to be careful out there. Carry your insurance information with you. This is either print out or like get the ID card. It will have your policy number, your name, typically the dates the insurance is valid for, and the phone numbers to call for either for you or for the hospital. So to call and talk to the insurance company. And this is a good idea to put in your wallet. You can also, if you don't have a printer or a physical ID card, you can also just write this down on a note. It's just important that you carry it with you, so that in case you are incapacitated, then you get to share this information with someone that finds you can find this information. It can also be a good idea to share your insurance information with some of your close people, share it with your family, just so people have it and know in case they need to have that information. Another thing is nomads all around the world. There are different countries have different hospitals and definitely like different kind of cultures, in particular when it comes to this. Some hospitals tend to lean on like exploiting people and trying to do over treats, things like that, and other hospitals are less, they're not as technically advanced, and might not have a good setup for dealing with insurance companies. So it's a jungle out there when it comes to the hospitals. it's in terms of picking the hospital, if it's not an emergency where you have to go to the closest one. But even in those cases, if you're already at the hospital, talk to the insurance company so that go to a hospital where things will be a smooth ride, where there won't be, you don't have to argue or feel blindsided by the staff, and the insurance company has like a direct and easy line of communication. I mean, obviously sometimes there are emergencies, and wherever you go first, that's fine. But typically insurance companies will if you need to go to a better hospital or a different hospital, transportation from one hospital to another is also covered. So involve the insurance company and talk about like which hospital to go to. That is, the phone number should be on the ID card that comes with your policy. So yeah, and carry a credit card just in case. This is not an absolute must. Like, you will always be able to figure it out, but it's just like I said, not all hospitals are equally wanting to are not always want to collaborate with insurance companies. In particular, this is more if it's a lower range claim, like if it's very high, if you're in a severe accident, then it's going to be very expensive. Then it's typically always direct with the insurance company. But if it's a smaller claim, less than $1,000, or even maybe sometimes less than $5,000, they would prefer to just get it out of the world and might push you to pay, and then you'll claim with the insurance company afterwards. So it's definitely, just hopefully you don't have to use the credit card at the hospital, but just in case, to make sure you get the best treatment, it's a good idea to carry one that can cover, up to a certain lower amount of claims. I just also wanted to quickly touch upon the differences between health insurance and travel insurance. And when I'm saying travel insurance, I mean, in particular, like the medical part, that like it will cover a bunch of things, but health insurance will cover long-term treatment and can cover pre-existing conditions. So this is one of the main differences and why health insurance is much more expensive than travel insurance. It's your main, it can be your main medical insurance. Like, you don't need to fall back on something else. So if you have travel insurance, they are typically like with our insurance, you have to renew it every year. So if you get if you get diabetes for the first time during that year, and then you have to renew it, then that diabetes is not covered on the subsequent year. With health insurance, once you're in, you can keep paying for the health insurance, and whatever kind of diseases you get during that, will keep being covered. You will also typically, you will apply to get a health insurance where it can cover pre-existing conditions. So you will apply with your medical history, and then you will get a yes or a no if it's covered, or sometimes you have to pay extra to have your pre-existing condition covered. But once you're in, you're in. So it's just more comprehensive coverage that's meant to be your main, your ride or die. You can have it for as long as you want type of insurance, while travel insurance will more fix anything that's immediate, that is completely unexpected, but then once that year is up, you can no longer expect the travel insurance to cover that incident, and it will typically only cover new incidents. You can, so that's what I mentioned. You can have a health insurance for as long as you like. So when you have, when you're a nomad and, you're traveling around the world and you're living in different places, it's not, everyone will have to assess their own risk, but it's not a good idea to have only travel insurance and nothing to fall back on. So typically there would be something back in your home country, depending on where you're from, or maybe there's something through your parents. I would look into, like, if worse comes to worse, what are your options? And if there's absolutely nothing to fall back on, one thing you can do is buy a health insurance with a really high, we can get into more of the technical details, but with a really high deductible or out of pocket, just like if you end up getting something long term. Yeah, having something to fall back on in addition to the travel insurance, whether it's, you know, the public healthcare system where you're from, or if you have the right to buy health insurance in the country where you're from, no matter what. But in general, have something in addition to just your travel insurance, because, you know, to cover things like long-term treatment if you get cancer, for example. Yeah, so that's a little bit on that. Hope you learned a little bit about insurance, or or at least that this was a nice intro into the different questions that I'm sure you have. And that's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, and I noticed some themes, so I want to just start off with those questions, and then we'll get into everyone's specific questions. So one of the first things as I was scanning all the comments that really came up was CFAR insurance, cancel for any reason. And a lot of people had just some questions on, you know, when is that good? Should you get it? And, you know, I don't think SafetyWing offers CFAR insurance. But if you could just sort of enlighten people as to what that is and the benefits of, or disadvantages of getting that.
So it's essentially an insurance plan where you can cancel it at any time. I'm not 100. I don't know the specific concept. I mean, but ours is it's a running subscription, or you can cancel it and get refunded the remainder of the days. Yeah. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say for everyone asking about CFAR plans tend to be very expensive. So because as we learned in COVID that, you know, there are rules to insurance policies, and you just can't cancel for any reason unless you pay for it otherwise. And so I would say that if you're looking for a CFAR insurance, it's only really good if you're like, if you have some sort of expense, like a wedding, right? Something that's going to cost like tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars a lot. Otherwise, you're going to pay for a really high premium.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other questions people were really asking about that I noticed is, can you go into a little bit more detail on sort of pre-existing conditions? You mentioned a little bit about how if you got sick during your plan, and then you went to renew, that would be considered a pre-existing condition. So when there's the obvious things of, if I have diabetes and I get travel insurance, that's clearly a pre-existing condition. But what is or is not a pre-existing condition, and how does that affect a renewal of a plan? Because somebody did ask about annual travel insurance. So if I'm buying, say, an annual plan or a subscription from you, or just in general, how does pre-existing conditions get determined and work?
Yeah. So yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I can speak for our plan. This is probably small differences between different companies, but speaking for the SafetyWing Nomad insurance, you can buy it either pay upfront for a year, but if you have the subscription option where you pay every month or every week, you pay every 4 weeks, then that 4 week is not a renewal. So you can keep that for the full year. And even if you get something, you can still keep, paying for the next iteration. So you can keep it for a year, and anything accumulated in that year is then not a pre-existing condition, but anything before the start date of your insurance is a pre-existing condition. And the definition of pre-existing condition is essentially something you had before the start date. There's some gray area there, but in general, doctors will be involved to figure out if is this something you were likely to know about before. I mean, one very common thing that you see when you deal with insurance and claims is that people will buy insurances, and go to the hospital that same day, because they were like, oops. So don't do that, and don't be that person. That is typically denied as a pre-existing condition. So get it well ahead of time. Start date as the first day of your trip, and or if you're already on the trip, start date today, and then less likely that you have to deal with any kind of pre-existing condition. We do have coverage for acute onset of pre-existing condition. So there are some requirements there, like you haven't had any symptoms or diagnostic tests or anything basically in the last 2 year or 1 year. I have to find that if it's 1 year or 2 years, but and I think it's the last year. And then you can get covered like some of the immediate, completely unexpected flare-ups there, if it's like a within 24-hour type of emergency situation. But overall, pre-existing condition treatment not covered.
So as people buy insurance, what is like, I have two-part questions. One, what are some common mistakes that people make in the purchase of insurance? Like, what are like maybe 3 things people should, when they're thinking about insurance, consider? And then the other part is, what are common mistakes that you see when people make during the claims process? Because I know for a lot of people, the claims process can be very confusing too, just as confusing as, say, buying the policy. And I would say one mistake people make, I see, is people don't read their policies. So read it. But, mistakes people make in pitfalls to avoid in buying and pitfalls to avoid in making a claim.
Pitfalls to avoid in buying insurance. It depends a little bit on your personality type. But if you want to, if you rather, save money rather than, spend extra to just not have to deal with any hassle or anything later, you don't need to have, for example, like a zero deductible or, like I mentioned earlier, covering all your items, those kinds of things, because you are expected to pay more than you're like, every individual is expected to pay more than they claim. And if it's something that you could afford to replace yourself, that's probably a better financial decision for you, to just kind of self-insure your, the things that are not very expensive. But it depends. Some people prefer to just like, would rather pay extra to have that predictability. And like Matt said, not reading the policy. I would say, if you know about the pre-existing condition exclusion, you're pretty far ahead already. Like it is like one of the common mistakes I see is that people think that they can buy it retroactively because they just don't know the concept of insurance and not covering pre-existing conditions often. Let me think. And the last one is what I went into in the presentation. Talk to the insurance. If you don't talk to the insurance company about what hospital to go to, you can end up in just this like annoying situation where you're kind of like you're in a hospital where you don't trust the hospital, and the insurance company doesn't trust the hospital, and you might have to pay with they will make you pay with the credit card, and you don't know what's going to be covered or not. It's better to, if you have the opportunity to involve the insurance company in choosing the hospital. That's another mistake. And just in general, it's there aren't any really huge international hospital network. You're not going to find one that's, if you're nomading and you're in different locations, chances are pretty low that, a hospital in, 3 different cities are going to be in the same network. And which means that, you need to talk about like the specific hospitals that are in each location. It might even be a good idea for you to, if you're, more of a careful person, you can even talk about like, just in case something happens, what hospitals should I go to? Having, knowing that not all hospitals are equal, and not just in terms of the quality of care, but also in terms of, how they will deal with the financial side of things is a common mistake. And
then what do you see in terms of making claims? Like what pitfalls should people not do? What things should people not do?
The main thing is just making sure that you have all the documentation. Talk to the insurance company, or in our case, you can reach out to our customer support, because that's what delays the claims process. Is if finally it reaches the person who's going to evaluate the claim, and then they see that some of the documentation is missing, then just go straight back to the back of the queue with like a request to send more documentation. So making sure that like all the documentation that's necessary is there for the first claim will ensure that it takes a shorter time. And often in many cases, if it's a more expensive claim, like I said, it's arranged directly between the hospital and individual, and there's only the deductible that needs to be paid. So that's in a lot of cases you don't even have to deal, but when you do file a claim, then make sure you have all the documentation. It's a good idea to just read where you're filing the claim, or if you want to talk to a human, just ask the customer support.
Great. So let's take some questions from the audience. Okay. Erica will go through and read out some specific ones. Now we have 15, 20 minutes left, so I don't want to just ask all the questions. I want you guys to ask them. So
yes, and I have been diligently keeping track of all the questions, so you don't need to go and post your question again. Hopefully we will get to it. Otherwise, I have put Sarah's contact information and where you can connect to a SafetyWing there. And obviously Matt answers lots of questions on this too, if you have any questions afterwards. But I would love for you to go into a little bit about COVID. There were a lot of questions, specifically like Thailand requires $100,000 in COVID insurance. Is that covered with SafetyWing or most insurances? And also, if you're like found to have COVID and you need to now quarantine for 2 weeks, like is anything covered with that?
Great question. COVID definitely threw the whole, travel insurance industry in for a loop there. Before we get into the specifics of Thailand, it is when we launched our COVID coverage back in August, I don't know if there were many others at this point. I don't know how many others cover COVID, but I know that we do. That's kind of what I can say about like if it's common that it's covered or not. It is typical that travel insurance don't cover pandemics. We like most travel insurances have some kind of way of excluding a pandemic, just because it's such a massive high risk event, similar to how like in areas where there are tons of floods, that flood insurance is typically not there because it's like all or nothing. It's either thousands of houses or no houses, and it's just like too much of a risky event. And similar for pandemics. But how it typically works, at least with our insurance, is that pandemics are often like localized, or epidemics like the Zika virus, for example. When that happened, that was pretty localized. You can kind of just like go somewhere else and then you're not exposed to the risk. But with COVID, it was suddenly just like everywhere. In our situation, since the pandemics are excluded, we covered people to travel back to their home country or the safe place that they wanted to go to. Also, yeah, health insurance will typically cover pandemics, but they are more expensive. So those were kind of the things that we offered. But once COVID had been around for a while, and we were able to assess the risk for the different age groups, we started covering COVID, and it wasn't that, it was like $3 or $4 more a month to add in covering that risk. And how we cover COVID is that we cover medically necessary treatment at the same level as anything else. So if you get and our max limit, that means like the maximum you can claim per policy is $250,000 for anything. And that COVID would have been the same. So if you get a severe case of COVID and you have to go to the hospital and you're on a ventilator, those things are covered. Then coming to like the Thailand case and like the specific, I guess I can mention the quarantine coverage as a separate from Thailand as well. We cover, this is, you have to look into the specific policy of your travel insurance. We cover like a basic quarantine coverage where if either you have symptoms and a doctor tells you to quarantine, or if you have tested positive for COVID and you're mandated to quarantine for 10 days, then you get $50 a day until until you don't have to quarantine anymore. So basically, if you had symptoms, were told to quarantine, and then the test comes back negative, then you don't get any more. But yeah, $50 a day for up to 10 days. And then the Thailand specific situation where the $100,000, like we said, we cover, that's below our limit. But one specific thing that I know they do in Thailand. So note how I said, like, what's covered by insurance is what's medically necessary. And I've heard that in Thailand, they will put people in hospitals for quarantine. In particular, if you have, if you're, if you look like a wealthy person. They will, so you don't get the quarantine in, your Airbnb like you can in most countries, or wherever. They will put you in a hospital, and you have to pay hospital rates for that. Which can often be, depending on how expensive the hospital is, like thousands of dollars, or $1,000 a night. So that is not covered. We had the first time this happened. So one thing that happens when you're an insurance company is like you get liable if you say that you cover something. Then you cover it. And we accidentally told one person that we did cover that because it was before anyone really knew that Thailand had implemented this. So then we were able to cover that person. But since then, we have informed all of our customers that if you go to Thailand, there's some risk. And if you test positive, they'll put you in a hospital, and that's not covered. There is, however, I have to go and find the name of that. There's a summary, but there are local insurances in Thailand that are pretty cheap that are meant to only cover that specific thing. So that's what we see a lot of our customers that are in Thailand or are planning on going to Thailand do, that like they will buy our insurance as like the blankets, for any kind of medical thing that can happen, including, treatment of, medically necessary treatment of COVID, but you can get that extra coverage for that, quarantine hospital thing that they can set up, like a local Thai coverage for just that portion.
Wow. That's interesting. And then somebody just had a follow-up question that I feel like is relevant. What about like if you have COVID and you have to stay somewhere for 2 weeks, and then like your trip that you've already paid for has been canceled, like the future things, the hotels, the tours, is that covered also?
Not under our insurance. Like we have, if your flight gets canceled, even if that's for COVID, then there's some coverage for you to find a temporary place to stay. But in the case that you get sick, then And no, there are a lot of, in general, good cancellation policies out there right now during COVID. And I'm sure everyone's noticed that it's pretty easy to get flights refunded for whatever reasons these days. I mean, because of the COVID situation. So I would just, look into that and see, make sure it's refundable, which is, even the low cost, airlines are mostly doing that right now.
Right. So we are the Nomadic Network. And so we have quite a few nomads or people that are on like very long-term trips or that are planning on taking multiple trips a year. And they're wondering like, in terms of long-term coverage, is that possible? And also like if you were to like go from New York to Europe, New York to, and coming home, like, would you be better off buying like a year of insurance? Or how does that work?
We just upgraded our coverage where there is some benefits to having it like back to back year after year. For there's like the specific thing if, a pre-existing condition that you haven't sought treatment for, basically so that you can carry it over. That's kind of like that's a new thing that's been implemented is that I would go and read the specifics of the policy because they're like it's quite like exclusionary, but that's an update, so that means that if you start experiencing symptoms towards the end of your period and then you back to back start another year after that, then you could still get that covered under the new plan as if there wasn't, a lapse. But if you started seeking treatment, then all of that would have to be covered under the previous plan, which is typically up to 60 days after the final day if you're like mid-treatment or something. There is no limit to how long you can have it. I mean, we don't cover you in your home country other than for shorter visits home. That's just something to keep in mind. Our definition of home country is where you principally reside and receive regular mail. You kind of just have to think about like what is your home country. So, if you've been in Thailand for 5 years straight, even though, you're from somewhere else, you can kind of argue that Thailand is your home country. But if you're a nomadic and you're nomadic for years and years on end, you can keep having the travel insurance. No limit to how long you can have it.
Great.
And beneficial to have it back to back. And then there is this thing with, we're working on fixing this, but we actually have this thing right now where you have to switch policies, like, the US and everywhere else are like differently regulated markets. So you actually have to switch policies if you go back and forth to the US. This is just like an unfortunate thing. So I would just, that's something to be aware of. We put a lot of, if you have our plan and you're planning on adding US coverage, there are, you get like a lot of pop-ups and like where you can read about that specific things. But basically you will renew your policy every time you switch between a US and a non-US plan. We are working on fixing that though. So like within 6 months, we should have worked something out.
Great. Mm-hmm. Great. And I think you just answered it saying it's US versus non-US, but like if someone were to get your plan, would they have to tell you exactly the countries that they're planning on going?
No, we just want say, mentioning one country, but you are covered globally. The reason to go and update the destinations is mainly, for like border entry. A lot of countries or like when you apply for visas, you need to show that you are covered for that specific country. Other than that, no. The only exception is the US versus non-US. If you have the non-US plan and you go to the US, you're not covered.
I also think that somebody found it on your website that Cuba, Iran, Syria, and North Korea are not covered. So if you're planning on going to those 4 countries, you won't be covered.
Yeah, correct. There's some Americans can be covered in Cuba. That's but you have to look into the details of that. But there are details on the website. But that's the only exception to that. But in general, those locations, as well as sanctioned OFAC countries. So that's typically like war zones or sanctioned OFAC areas. Typically like war zones or other things are also not covered.
Can you also speak about people who are older that are traveling? Because there's quite a few people asking about, like, what about over 50? What about over 60? What about over 70? Yeah.
We are working on fixing this. Currently, our insurance stops working at 70. So you can have it up until you're, up until you turn 70. Other than that, yeah, it's just that the price goes up because, like I mentioned in the presentation, it's just like the risk is higher for something medically to go wrong the older you are. But yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend getting insurance, and like just exactly the same thing goes. It's more common for people, that are a little bit older and are kind of are starting to get wary of how they're the body, how they're not invincible. While younger people tend to think they're invincible, and and it seems like it's almost more common for younger people to skip out on the travel insurance than for older people. But yeah, same applies to everyone.
Right.
Get insured.
Maybe Matt can also share some of his, because he gets this question a lot.
Yeah, I mean, most places don't cover insurance for exactly what Sarah cover older folks because greater risk involved, and I mean, a lot of companies stop at 70. So there's just greater risk, but I know SafetyWing is working on it too. But there are companies out there that do cover that 70 plus crowd, and those policies tend to be slightly more expensive. I mean, it's the same thing with any insurance for anything. The greater the risk, the more you have to pay, and we can argue about the fairness of it all, but that's just how a lot of these folks operate. But it's great to know that SafetyWing is changing their product to include older folks. And I see David's comment here, share the studies on the risk. You mentioned this to me before. It's just sort of, it's a stale industry in so many ways that it's nice to have SafetyWing sort of bringing some 21st century tech and compassion into it all.
Yeah, I think I'll end on this question. Can people buy travel insurance if they were to, say, move abroad for a year or so? Oh, you're muted. There you go.
There we go. Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was just a bit like,
yeah. Can people buy travel insurance if they were to, say, move abroad for a year or more?
Yes. The question to that is yes. Yeah, and you can buy it after you've already left as well. I mean, it's better, to have it from day one. But if you're, already abroad and you're like, oh, I don't have insurance, but it sounds like a good idea, you can buy it while you're already abroad.
That is great to know. I will say that the SafetyWing website is incredibly cute. And I encourage you all to go on and just play with their calculator and see if it would make sense for you to purchase insurance. I had so much fun on the website, and there were some questions on prices and other things, and all of that information could be found on the website. I just dropped it in again. Yes, Matt?
Yeah, and before we wrap up on the hour, just like to say that, I am a strong proponent of travel insurance. It's the one thing, it's like all insurance, this thing you pay for that you hope you never have to use. Sadly, I have had to use travel insurance in the past, and it's always worth the cost. Definitely read your policies. Where I see people go wrong is they go upset and flustered that this one thing that happened isn't covered, and it's not covered. Travel insurance is not this all encompassing thing. There are exclusions and limits to it. It's really it's so you don't become financially ruined. It's there for emergencies. It's not a substitute for your regular health insurance. It's there so when stuff goes really wrong, you can safely get back home, as Sarah said, to your regular coverage. Definitely read your policies. Definitely keep receipts and all documentation. You want as much as possible, but I strongly recommend you use it. I do like the SafetyWing website. It's super cool and user friendly. Everything can be done simply electronically. And if you are we've been talking about travel insurance, but if you are a digital nomad and you are a permanent kind of remote worker, SafetyWing does offer a plan called Remote Health that also caters more to the people who are not so much away for a month or whatever, but more sort of one of those remote workers and digital nomads out there. So they also, that is many of us, and that's a great product that I see that's really kind of unique to them in many ways. So check that out if you are looking for some sort like a digital nomad kind of remote health plan. Before we wrap up on the hour, Sarah, is there any final words you would like to mention or say?
Just thank you so much for having me. It was great to hear your questions, and we are coming up on time. So if you are interested in our plan specifically, then you go to our website. There's a customer service chat in the corner, and you can keep asking questions there about specific things. Is this covered? Is this covered? So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, SafetyWing has a great chat feature. They have it on the bottom right. You just pop in with a message. We've actually have used the same company before for a chat feature we tried on our website. But it's super great and responsive. And I know one of the complaints we have with insurance companies is that they are not responsive, and it's very hard to get communication from them. And SafetyWing is very responsive. You can just chat online with the website, no calling or cumbersome wait times.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah. I noticed in the chat as you guys were coming in that a lot of you said that this was your first event. I just wanted to say welcome. And also I wanted to direct you to where you can find even more of our events. Here at the Nomadic Network, we host anywhere from 2 to 6 events a week, and they're all geared towards having you meet like-minded people or find out about resources that can help you travel cheaper, better, longer, and more. So if you go to thenomadicnetwork.com/events, we're always adding new events with unique speakers and different topics about places you can travel around the world or different ways to travel. So I really highly encourage you to go there. Also, one of our really cool events that we started at the beginning of the year was a travel book club. And so every first Wednesday of every month, we have a travel book club that Nomadic Matt hosts with the author of a book. And so next Wednesday, September 1st, we have Mark Adams coming to share about Turn Right at Machu Picchu, which is just a really amazing adventure travel book that you guys should definitely read. And then if you found value in today's event, or if you would like to just deepen your connection to Nomadic Matt and our community, we have this membership program that we created, which is called the Nomadic Matt Plus. And you can find that at nomadicmatt.com/NM Plus or through this QR code. Besides all of the TNN replays, past and future, you also get free signed books, guides, never before seen photos, access to our courses, and we just started monthly giveaways. So if you go on today and you enter or you sign up, you're automatically entered to win our monthly giveaways. And this month, we're actually giving away a domestic round trip flight. So domestic to you, whatever that means to you, so around you. But we would love for you to be a part of our community. It's really cool. And so please check it out. And last but not least, I'd like to say thank you for being a part of our travel community. You guys came with all the greatest questions today. I'm sorry we didn't get to every single one of them, but seriously, very valuable. And you guys bring so much value to our community, and we love having you. And we hope to see you next time.